Aloha! This is me, MarkO, talking, and I welcome you to Dances with Dragons, a GreenHeart Foundation podcast. In this podcast, you will hear about my real-life stories and adventures, together with the exciting current projects of our GreenHeart Foundation. So, sit back, relax, and get ready to listen. Aloha! We left off talking about one of my adventures, starting with Ulla in Sweden, a wild adventure down to MarkO, where I began learning about actual hands-on business, bartering, trading, and collecting. Wherever I went, I always found there were some very specialty items, whatever I was buying, group of rings or jewelry. And one particular piece would speak out to me, literally. It was extremely beautiful, exceptional beauty to it. And I began to recognize that as I was going through my early career of buying and getting into the import-export business, that I would find particularly unique products that I would save. I just felt like, oh, well, this one I don't really want to sell. This is too special. I'll save it. Save for what? I don't know, but I just started this. I've got to collect, I've got to save. And I do recall mentioning earlier, I hope you all recall, that much of my thrill of the world, excitement, introduction to the world came through my grandmother, Grandma Rika. As a 3-4-year-old boy, I recall, because those were the couple years before we moved out to Arizona from Minnesota, that I would be engaged by my grandma and her charm bracelet, and telling me stories of different countries of the world that she traveled to and got a beautiful golden charm that she added to this bracelet. And then I started getting the coins that she collected, and then even stamps, but I was fascinated with the coins. So I started collecting these coins. And I later went on, just probably 5-8 years later, I remember being in junior high school, and I started collecting coins and making an actual coin collection of American coins. And I always was looking for the secret one, the most beautiful one, the most rare, the most unique. So while I was on this trip with Ulla in MarkO, and my goal was to start learning about this type of business, I began looking for the exceptional pieces. They were always more expensive, but I would get one. I would always feel, well, get one of the best. Then I can also negotiate and do business with the major bulk of the collecting or buying trip. Being on that trip with Ulla, learning about negotiating, I then returned to Sweden, finished my university. This is the end of '72, the first trip down to MarkO with Ulla. The end of the university year in Sweden was May, and I had one of my best friends who was going to be coming over at the beginning of June. John Lester, my closest friend, buddy, was going to come take a little summer holiday in Europe, since I was in Europe, and meet me in Sweden. And we were planning to go either to Bali, but first we wanted to go to the Midnight Sun. So we were going to first do Midnight Sun, and then whatever money we had left, if we had money, we were on our way to Bali. That was a goal. Before that John Lester adventure, I had my best friend from the university in Lund, Sweden, Paul Gordon, who had hair down to his waistline and was one of the most intelligent people I'd ever met. He was literally a genius. I befriended him, and we went on an adventure from Sweden, hitchhiking all the way to the southern parts of Greece. And we got to some of the most remote islands, Mykonos, I recall, and Simi, small little islands away from tourists. And everywhere I was going, I started noticing shops selling products. I became curious. I had learned, oh, well, look at the jewelry. Oh, look at the beautiful cloth pieces, textiles. What's a textile? Looks like something embroidered or woven. I don't know, but I was learning what the difference of embroidery and weaving is on a piece of cloth. So I started on this adventure with Paul. We made it hitchhiking all the way to Greece. We had virtually no money left after a year living in Europe, in Sweden, going to the university. But I had put a little savings aside for the summer trip, wherever it was going to lead us. And on the way from Greece, my goal was to get to Romania. And Romania is my fatherland. Grandfather, my grandmother are born in Romania. My father was born in USA, Minnesota. Grandpa Max and Grandma Seal were born in Romania. So I found myself to be half Romanian with a father pure-blooded Romanian. And I knew from Ula that they had some remarkable embroidery that the women did on blouses. These gorgeous, fluffy, big sleeved, flowing linen, soft linen material that had beautiful red and blue primarily embroidery. They didn't use a rainbow of colors. It was, I recall vividly, just usually two-tone red and blue. The difference between embroidery and weaving is something that I began to learn. You look at a piece of cloth and you see designs on it, and it can either be printed on from a machine and a manufactured piece of cloth, or cloth that has been finished and someone takes a needle and thread and does embroidery on it, just what we imagine embroidery to be. Woven is something that makes that same embroidered design. Let's say you want to put a flower or a bird, you embroider it, as many cultures around the world did. Needle, thread, applying it to a piece of cloth that usually is one monotone color behind background. Whereas on a loom, as that piece is being woven, actually producing the background fabric that is then a brocade applied extra threads to that background piece of cloth that weaves in the design. And we've always heard analogies, the fabric of life. I've always used analogies, time warp. Warp are the lengthwise threads of a loom. So a woven piece of cloth and brocade on the cloth is very different from a manufactured, or it could be a woven piece of a background plain colored fabric that then embroidered colored threads are applied and embroidered into. That's the basic difference of two different types of production of cloth. And I was on a mission to buy some Romanian blouses, learn what I had learned from Ula over the past year, and found myself on trains heading into Romania with Paul. And our goal was to find a small village that did these blouses. I just didn't want to go to the capital city and buy from a tourist shop. So that was another thing Ula had taught me. Just don't go buy as a tourist would. Find the source. Where are things made? And that's where I want to go and learn about the production of anything that I was going to be buying or negotiating, dealing with. So I am on a train, and all of a sudden we see signs saying the castle of Count Dracula, and realize that Romania is where the actual Count Dracula hails from. Count Dracula was Romanian, and this image of a Dracula and a blood-sucking at the neck of young girls monster, we wanted to get to Dracula's castle. And lo and behold, we just jumped off a train. It was barely demarked, and I found that we were all of a sudden having to grab our bags, grab whatever we had been resting with and eating, and jump off a train that stopped at a platform for 90 seconds. No one got off the train but us. The train pulls away, and here we are in the town of Count Dracula. No taxi, no one around, no nothing. We're just at some platform in the middle of a small town in central Romania. And we always were hitchhikers, so we started putting out our thumb and ended up meeting a lovely lady who told us It's very dangerous to attempt to spend the night, but that didn't stop us because I remember she invited us. She must have given us a ride, and she invited us in. We were having some lovely lunch or tea and snacks, and this lady said, "Beware of the castle of Count Dracula. It's haunted," was the best that she could describe it. And didn't stop us in the least. And Paul and I had, of course, our backpacks with sleeping bags and insulite pads for sleeping on cold ground. And we just immediately started walking. There was no one in these streets, and ended up spending the night in a broken down castle of Count Dracula. I began to get sensations during that moment, that night, of dragon energy. Not Dracula being the type of vampire. That's the word that people seem to associate. Dracula and a vampire and those fang teeth hanging down. No, this was dragon energy that I was feeling. And decades later, I made the association watching Francis Ford Coppola's movie called Dracula. And in an interview Coppola gave, he said, "I have done this movie. I've done best I could to do justice to Count Dracula and that story, that legend from Romania. But he says the true story has still yet to be told. The true story of Dracula." And I remember vividly watching this movie, and at one scene when Dracula was being introduced, Coppola slowed the camera down, and his hand went across the screen, across his face, and he had this big knobby golden ring of a dragon head on his hand. He was representing the dragon culture. And Dracula, the country named Bhutan, land of the thunder dragon, Dracula is how the Bhutanese pronounce it. Land of Druk, dragon, thunder dragon. But Dracula, and Count Dracula even says, "I am Dracula." And this was the land of gypsies. This was a land of Bohemians. On my grandmother's side, she comes from Bohemia. I am a Bohemian, Romanian dragon in my blood. And we've all been able to start to learn that dragons are the guardians and protectors of blood. And there's an epic small book that I was given by a lady one day when I was doing spiritual retreats, and I was being asked to talk about my experiences with the Maya culture and goddess nature, goddess energy. And this woman gifted me a book that's still hanging right now, sitting on my shelf, facing out, and it's called Dragon Time. And it's literally about women on their moon time, on their menstruation, having a period, and it's blood time. And these ancient cultures called it dragon time. And so associations of Dracula, a vampire sucking blood, is about women who begin having their first moon time, their first blood. Dragons are blood protectors. So I had remarkable revelations that started happening during the night, sleeping. I continue to this day, always seem to wake up right in the middle of the night and right before dawn, and flashes go off. And I get inspiration. I get what I call breakthroughs and eureka moments, and I associate this with that and that culture and that language and this calendar. So here we are in Romania. We end up, after one night, finding a beautiful village. The name that comes to mind is Timisoara, but I believe it was even a smaller village that we found. I found some lady selling blouses out of her storefront that just barely was a store. It was really her home. And I remember buying 10 of the most exquisite blouses, getting one that was exceptional, paying more for it, and realizing, well, I'll make a business with the other 9, but I want this example. And Bhutan happens to be one of the primary countries that was the destination and goal of my life adventures. Number one, because it's called the land of the thunder dragon. my studies, as I had mentioned earlier, with Don Carlos Castaneda, where I clarified that the dragon was my animal ally that I resonated with, and I was instructed by Don Carlos Castaneda to find 3 lands where the dragon is the icon, the center. And so I was able to find and follow dragon energy around the world. And Bhutan, being the land of the dragon, first drew me there. Their remarkable textiles. Again, I am a man of cloth, and I've been attracted and drawn to the women who produce beautiful, hand-woven, heart-made cloth. Bhutan turns out to be one of the 2 primary countries that now, with my GreenHeart Foundation that I have relaunched together with my daughter Chanale and this dynamic team of ladies from around the world, who for the past nearly 1 year we have been promoting 2 countries that are the closest to my heart: the motherland of my daughters, which is Laos, and Bhutan, which is the country I first stepped into following my passion to find the first land of the dragon. I have then continued to pursue a passion of what I call Druk Quest, the quest of the dragon, and the quest of 3 lands of dragons. So that particular adventure, Romania, brought us back to Sweden, hitchhiking, having some crazy attempted stop in Czechoslovakia. But again, there are so many stories, as anyone knows from travels. Every day is an adventure. Every night is a new exciting moment in your travels. Thank you for listening to Dances with Dragons. I hope you all enjoyed my stories of the adventures of a modern-day Marco Polo. Join us next week to listen to more exciting real-life stories. If you enjoyed our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with others. To learn more about us, please visit our website at greenheartfoundation.org and follow our social media accounts. See you next week.